Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Transcription services provided by transcribeme.com. Visit them on the web at transcribeme.com/BeanCast for up to 25% off. That's transcribeme.com. Episode 503, Can't Fake the Funk. For Monday, July 9th, 2018. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norp. Thanks for joining us. In advertising, we like to believe that research and data will lead us to compelling messages to reach our target audiences. But what if our biases make us completely out of touch with our markets? A UK study suggests exactly that, so tonight we'll discuss. Also, the impact of all those agency hours, whether streamers make better influencers, an examination of Prime Day and other similar tactics, plus this week's At-Fail 5. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the president of Convince and Convert, author, speaker, Mr. Jay Baer. Hey, Jay.
Bob, fantastic to be back with you on the cast.
Fantastic to have you back. Now, also joining us, we have the creative director of high-end clothing maker Moose Knuckles Canada, Ms. Stephanie Hoff. Steph, welcome to the program.
Hey, Bob.
I love the name of your company, the company you work for. And finally, we welcome a contract digital creative who's a designer, illustrator, also an ultra-marathoner, which I think is absolutely insane, Ms. Jerlyn Thomas. Jerlyn, welcome back.
Hi, happy to be here again.
Well, we've got a lot to cover, so I'm going to jump right into the topics. And first up, a recent study of UK advertising professionals versus the average consumer has shined a light on a problem many of us have been unwilling to face. With most advertising executives being city-dwelling, liberal-leaning, career and power-focused individuals, Jerlyn, are we getting out of touch with the general population that leans more conservative and is focused less on individualism and more on community? What's your take on this study, and is it something that we need to worry about?
I think it definitely is something we should worry about because most of us seem to be focused on what we see in our daily lives. Like, I live in the city, but on the weekends I'm upstate. And since I live in New York State itself is kind of catered towards conservative once you get out of the city. Many of us don't realize this. Like, actually, on the 4th of July, I spent it at a barbecue with some people. And most of my friends have smartphones. And I met this wonderful guy who I'll call Mr. W. So Mr. W takes out his phone. It's a flip phone. And he calls it Mr. Flippy. And I was like, wait, Mr. W, can I look at your phone? So, Bob, I work on this account where I try to meet people who are about my age, and we all have smartphones. But I also want to sell to Mr. Flippy. And I can't reach him because everything I design is for mobile.
Yeah, and that in and of itself is a problem. I mean, the fact that, from a technology standpoint, we're more focused on having the latest, greatest gadgets in our industry. I mean, everybody in the advertising world that I know of is always proud to show off their latest device, yet And we're designing for these devices, which is very forward thinking, and I wouldn't counsel against it. But at the same time, you're right. This scenario that you're describing leads to a big disconnect from a technical standpoint. And that's not even getting into the emotional, cultural, and other sociological factors that are in play.
Yeah, because I asked him, what did he do for a living? He's retired. He's 68. And he says he just watches his grass grow. And I'm like, how do I reach this guy? And then he tells me, oh, sometimes I get phone calls and it shows the name on the TV. And I was like, oh, I got you. You have a smart TV. You may not have a smartphone, but I can reach you through TV ads. So I think some of us need to realize that we might have to actually interview the people that we're reaching.
Well, but that's the whole point of this article, and I'm going to move on to you, Jay, about this because we rely on data, we rely on research, we rely on focus groups in order to get a sense of what our consumers' motivating factors are. Is that enough when our biases are leaning so heavily in a direction that predisposes us to not want to speak to people in the way that they want to be spoken to?
No, it's a huge problem. We have too much homogeneity in the business, both in terms of where major agencies are located and the types of people who work in those agencies and their age range, their political beliefs. I mean, there's this big drive for gender and racial diversity in the agency community, but you don't see an equal drive in terms of technology aptitude or even political beliefs, I'd suggest. So I live in Bloomington, Indiana. I travel all the time, but I live in the classic Midwestern college town. I'm in the only blue city in a very red state. And I got to tell you, you know how many apps we have? I mean, I'm in New York this week. You know how many apps there are here? You can get anything delivered via app in New York. You know what you can get delivered via app in Bloomington, Indiana? Nothing. Nothing is the answer. So when I travel, I come back and I feel like I'm coming from the future, right? And the things that we talk about on this show are so outside the reality curve for major, massive, huge swaths of the world. And look, I'm an old man. I've been doing this for 30 years. And I think to some degree, the shift to digital has hurt us in this regard. Because when I was first starting in this business, we spent an awful lot of time with customers, an awful lot of time because we had no other choice. Now we press buttons and we look at data and we, pour over spreadsheets and we think that equals customer understanding. I don't know that it does.
Steph, I got to bring you in on this conversation because this is not necessarily something that you face in a lot of ways because you deal very much with a young, hip audience, a very technologically savvy audience. But at the same time, you experienced a large degree of disconnect with your brand at the very beginning when you first started working with them, and you helped them to understand that they weren't talking to their audience. So maybe you could share a little bit of that story and help us to understand what kind of journey you went through to shift the perception of the marketers to be more in line with who the customer was.
I just think to bring it back to fashion again, and I don't want it to feel too fashion oriented, but that's my world. We just experienced a massive shift in culture about 2-3 weeks ago. Virgil Abloh presented his Louis Vuitton collection at Paris Fashion Week. This is a man with no formal education in fashion design. His parents were working class immigrants from Africa. He's now the creative director of Louis Vuitton, the 5th highest grossing fashion label in the world. Mm-hmm. I think we just need to realize that the world is changing rapidly. And I'm really, in my industry too, I'm constantly educating, the owners of the company and some of our shareholders about this. And I'm like, it's not the same. So what we were talking about, just, the last couple conversations have been about change and about the future. And it really is understanding that, that every single day it's a whole new ball game, sorry. And the old world gatekeepers are becoming irrelevant. You can't, the publishers and the editors and the buyers and everyone, that was making these decisions about how we're going to shop.
But at the same time, these old world models, these old world consumers, these old world gatekeepers still command a huge amount of the audience out there. I mean, yes, it's kind of shifting and going away, but being aligned with your customer, being aligned with your audience is more important than pursuing any kind of agenda, whether it's a technology agenda or a political agenda or even a sociological agenda. It seems to be more about trying to connect with your customer that's
For
broken.
Sure. And that's why Virgil's there, is because the Louis Vuitton was having a very difficult time connecting with their end consumer. And, you know, the middle class wants luxury goods. And, you know, Virgil knows how to speak to them. He's relevant. And they had to work with somebody like Virgil to, you know, reinvent themselves, to make themselves relevant to their consumer. Virgil represents everyone. He represents, you know, people, the struggle that we all want, you know, this luxury world. We want travel. We all want to live these aspirational lifestyles. And he did it. And he's working for Louis Vuitton. So I think that like that we're going to see more of that in many industries, is people finding ways to relate to their consumer and using people like Virgil Abloh as, you know, as that medium to connect them with their audience.
But Jerlyn, what about the audience? Like I agree with Steph so much that, you know, you need to be paying attention to what your audience is and what it wants, and you need to adjust if you're an old world brand. But what if you're a brand that wants to be hipper, but your audience is not willing to follow you? I mean, how do you reach out to them? How do you manage to work in this digital age in a way that commands the attention of people who aren't necessarily digitally savvy and maybe a lot more sheltered than we would like to believe that they are?
You still have to research and like go out to where these consumers are, I think.
Is it research, or is it paying attention to the research? Because
that is researching, paying attention to what these consumers are doing, and they can see through it if you're trying to reach them in a fake way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jay, help me out here. What's your take on the situation when we're trying to reach out to an audience that doesn't want to hear the kind of messaging that we're wanting to put out there? How do we take that research? How do we take that understanding of who this customer is and make it more impactful and turn it into something that we can actually create that doesn't offend our values, but at the same time reaches out to values that are completely different than ours?
I don't even know if it's so much of a values conversation as it is simply an advertising effectiveness conversation. And I think like anything else, the road to recovery starts with recognition. And I see far too many advertising communications professionals who just do not recognize that they are not their own target audience, that the people that they work with are not their target audience. Their friends are not their target audience, right? That they are living in a 5% bubble. And that is not who they're selling to. But it's hard to lose sight of that when you're ensconced in this sort of upper middle class, everybody's going to Banana Republic every day and drinking $7 coffees world. It's hard to understand that there's a whole other society out there because you simply are not exposed to it in many places. And I believe one of the great solutions would be that agencies should actually have more field offices in smaller towns. I think they do much better work.
Well, let me play devil's advocate for a second here, and let's take it from the opposite standpoint. You know, advertising is something that shifts culture. Advertising is something that often is tasked and often encouraged to be a leader in terms of trying to establish a new way of thinking. I mean, we see that in multicultural advertising that goes on. We see that in the portrayal of gay couples now in advertising. All of those things are offensive to somebody, but they're the right things to do. So shouldn't we also be tasked to do the right thing, whether or not effectiveness is part of the equation, or is it always about effectiveness?
Well, advertising isn't fine art. That's the challenge, right? I mean, yes, your point is well formed, but no agency gets to do the work they want to do because they feel it's the right thing to do. They're getting to do the work they want to do because some company is paying them to do so. So it takes two to tango. So as long as your client is interested in pushing society forward, then sure, I'll sign on for that. But we have to remember, we're hired guns in this business. We're not Michelangelo with a chisel.
This hurts my heart. I hate our industry sometimes.
Got to get paid, Bob.
I know, but it's true. You know, you do have to get paid, and there's no room for ethics, it seems like. Steph,
Bob, if everything was ethical, this show would be so much less interesting. And we have to understand that this is good fodder for the BeanCast.
Oh man. Well, Steph, what's your take on the fact that advertising has this dual purpose? It has this purpose to be effective, but at the same time, it has this purpose of leading social change within our markets, within our countries, within our society. I mean, are we Are we tasked to a higher purpose, or is it always about effectiveness?
I don't know. I've never done anything that I wasn't passionate about, so it's difficult for me to comment on. I really I wouldn't go to work if I didn't want to do it. I just wouldn't do that anymore. I don't know. I only want to do things that I love and that I enjoy doing, and I don't know. I'm lucky that way. I don't know. I feel like more people should do that too. Create products you like, create stuff you like, you enjoy, and I think your audience will connect with it better because they see that it's cool and that there's passion behind it, and there's a real genuine need for it. There's value to the audience, whether it's a video or whether it's a T-shirt. It's make something that you like yourself and that your friends like, and it doesn't have to be necessarily suited to the target audience. It's just you have to feel it. I don't know.
No, very good points. Good points all. And since we're on the subject of things that kill our hearts, let's talk next about hourly billing. Advertisers complain that their agencies are always exceeding their budgeted hours. Agencies, meanwhile, complain that the actual hours reflect a more accurate picture of what it takes to complete projects rather than a procurement negotiated budget. Now this issue over overbilling is being cited as a primary reason for clients taking their work in-house, which I'm a little bit skeptical of, but there you have it. My question, Jay, is whether hourly billing itself may be part of the problem. Do you believe that hourly billing still has a place in our business, or should we be more moving toward performance-based or even project-based billing structures?
Yeah, I mean, we've been project-based for all 10 of our years at Convince and Convert. So this one strikes pretty core to my day-to-day existence. We've never hourly billed anybody or even come up with an hourly rate. It's always been project fees or performance fees. I feel like ultimately that's the right way to do it, because if we miss the budget, if it takes us more hours than we thought, that's my fault. That's our fault. That's not the client's fault. If we can't estimate it correctly, then that's not really a risk that the client should bear, in my estimation. Now, I certainly understand if a negotiated fee or a negotiated structure is agreed to by both parties, and then all of a sudden the client has a million change orders, which requires the agency to do more work than they expected. Well, that's a different story. But I think from the context of the articles that we prep for the show, it seems like agencies say, well, here's what it's going to cost, and then at the end of the day, well, actually it costs more. So it's like if you're hiring a guy to build a wall for your house, and he says, well, I thought the wall was going to be X, but now the wall is X plus Y. Now you sort of have a question here, because I thought you knew how much the wall was going to cost. So I think that's kind of the situation that we find ourselves in. And to me, the real problem is this. There is no circumstance by which hourly billing rewards or incentivizes efficiency, because it absolutely rewards and incentivizes the exact opposite. It's just human nature. I believe that if agencies moved unilaterally and comprehensively to project fees, every agency would get more efficient. Why? Because they simply would have to.
Yeah, I agree with you in spirit. I mean, I think that the hourly billing structure does lead to waste because it's human nature. The human nature abhors a vacuum, and one of the biggest vacuums out there is the time
all
sheet.
law firms do that too, and nobody has ever said, you know where I got my best deal ever? From my lawyer.
Well, that's it.
At the same time too, when you used the comparison of building a wall, we're not building walls too. We're building, I don't know, there's a creative element to a lot of the things that we do too. And it's you have to be inspired. And sometimes I can have a very inspiring hour, and sometimes that takes me a whole day. So it's just I don't know, you can't really bill any, it seems so ridiculous. It's there's still artistry behind it. You still have to I don't know, sometimes you're just feeling more creative than other days.
But let's go back to the reason that hourly billing exists, which is, I mean, hourly billing exists so that the agencies could bill for a lot of time. And then, of course, the procurement officers at companies, which is a late 70s, early 80s kind of phenomenon where these procurement officers started to rise up within the organization, and they had the sole task of improving profitability to raise the shareholder value within a company so that the CEO could get a bonus. I mean, that is exactly what's going on here. And so with that kind of structure in place, the procurement officers looked at what can we do to reduce cost, and what they could do to reduce cost was hours. If they could reduce the hours that it takes for an ad to be created, for an advertising agency to do their work, then they've effectively done their job. So is procurement part of the problem, Jay? I mean, is procurement the whole reason why we're clinging to hours, because that's the metric they're using in which to judge the efficiency that the agencies are delivering and the total value that they're creating for the company?
Yeah, there's certainly some of that, and it's more typical in large companies. And I think that the overall belief, and it's probably flawed at the root, is that hourly billing and not only keeping track of hours, but calculating hours in terms of overall project financial compensation somehow adds a layer of transparency to the process. That if it was a flat rate bill, well, what if the agency billed us $10, but only took the agency $2 worth of time? Well, that's not fair. And I think that's sort of what the client thinks is, well, if we're doing it hourly, then we know that the hours were spent because we've got a paper trail against that. But I think to the earlier point, that really robs both sides of any measure of creativity, and frankly, doesn't speak very well to how much both parties trust one another.
All right.
From a standpoint of value creation, though, there's got to be a better metric. Like I know people play around with a performance-based metric, which does effectively take the creative that's being put together by the agency and place a value creation element on top of it. So it's basically tying the success of the company to the ad campaign. Now, it's a clumsy system in most cases, just because it puts a huge burden on the agency to deliver results on the bottom line when there's so many moving parts involved in that process. But at least it's acknowledging the fact that advertising needs to start becoming responsible and accountable for creating value within a company, as opposed to just getting paid. And that'll solve a host of problems. It will take away the fact that we're considered vendors instead of actual consultants, that we're somehow not part of the value equation, we're part of the cost equation. Is it times that we start acknowledging the accountability factor and start owning up to it in the agency world?
Oh, we're going to have to, and especially as more and more things move digitally and becomes easier to track back to actual value. I think we're all going to ultimately have to go that way. But my experience, and it may be different from others on the panel and others listening, has been the reluctant party when we talk about performance-based compensation has typically been on the client side, not on the agency side. When the agency says, we'll do it, the client's like, no, we don't want to give you that kind of access to the books, and we don't want to track it that closely, and it just becomes sort of a burden for the client, and so they decide to not do that. And obviously your results may vary. And then from the agency's perspective, while it certainly seems more than fair to tie your compensation at some level to the actual performance of the campaign, as you said, Bob, there's a lot of other things that can go awry. The advertising can be amazing, but the sales department can be terrible, right? You can lead a horse to water. The agency can't necessarily make the consumer drink 100% of the time. So the reality is any of these systems, whether it's hourly, performance-based, project-based, requires both sides to trust one another, right? And both sides have to give a little bit. No one's going to get the perfect model. It just doesn't exist. So it doesn't matter which you pick. Somebody's going to be a little bit unhappy, and that's typically the sign of a good deal.
Steph, you're the representative client here, so maybe I should get a little bit more of your opinion on this, because it seems to me that there's a huge disconnect between what the company needs and what the agency needs in order to get the work done. And it all comes down to this money equation, and it shouldn't. It should be more about what kind of value am I getting created, right? It should be about the value creation, or am I completely off base here?
No, totally. It should be about the value. And again, I couldn't agree more that it is really about trust, because sometimes it's just you get a sense that there was a value. You watch it, or you watch like the asset, or you like see the campaign or whatever the various working parts of it, and you're like, you have a sense whether it worked or not. And sometimes the metrics aren't necessarily telling of that, or the sales aren't telling of that. And exactly, to an earlier point too, there can be many other, maybe you're driving a bunch of people to a crappy website, and once they're there, the bounce rate's super high once they get to that website. Maybe the product's not great, So you drive all of this interest and this engagement, and no one actually wants the product. They actually like the ad better than the product. So there's just like a lot of variables in what works and what doesn't. There's a lot of moving parts in it. So again, yeah, it's just trust and about having an open conversation and just asking your consumer too, like surveying them and being like, did you like this ad? Did you like, this video? Did you like this live stream? And getting feedback from them.
Let me throw out one last question on this topic before we move out. And this is about the negotiation of fees that goes on by an agency. Is part of the reliance on is part of that reliance on hours and the part of this process of overstating hours, or at least reporting hours that go in excess of the budgeted hours? Is that actually a negotiation technique by the agencies? And does a flat fee or some other kind of structure actually take away an important negotiating tactic when you're sitting down with a client and you're trying to prove to them that this work that we're doing requires more money? I mean, Jay, you've been in that room. You've had to negotiate for these structures. I mean, what would you think?
I think where the negotiation comes in is in a competitive bidded scenario, right? If the client is looking at multiple agencies or looking to shift the work, or potentially looking to bring it in-house and is trying to do a cost-benefit analysis of that opportunity, then the easiest way to calculate the ROI is through hourly, because everybody's been trained to think that way. In order to calculate the ROI of a project fee, you have to know precisely in advance everything that's going to be included in that project. And that's one of the challenges, right? As advertising becomes more fluid, as advertising becomes more dynamic, as things happen programmatically that you could not have maybe envisioned 6 months ago or a year ago or whenever the contract was signed, it becomes harder in some cases to say, this is what we're going to charge you, period, because you don't really know what's included in the period. So it's hard for both sides to negotiate on that, because you're sort of negotiating based on a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, I agree, because like some projects we have here, we've had different hands touch it. Like sometimes I start on a project and a freelancer had to come in and take it over, and we realized the freelancer wasn't a perfect fit. So there's these random factors that occur in a project that, like, overbilling gets reinstated.
Well, good points, all people, but I'm going to move on to the next topic of the evening. There's a growing divide in determining influencer value. There's fake followers, which is a real issue for brands. There's the growing presence of live streaming personalities. And it's seeming that live streaming personalities are offering a more effective alternative overall. It's a live, actively engaged audience. It's harder to fake numbers, and its most successful hosts are pretty average, pretty typically very adept at delivering effective pitches. So, Steph, is live streaming simply the influencer marketing tactic du jour, or is it really becoming a best practice for marketers out there trying to get into audiences' hearts and minds? With that beautiful tee up. With that beautiful tee up, with a beautiful tee up of terrible intro, I'm going to pass this topic off to you. The football is now yours. Go for
it. Sure. Yeah, I love live streaming, like on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram stories, they're definitely more telling of an audience and engagement than, some of, influencer generated content like a post, like an Instagram post or a Facebook post or a YouTube video. I can tell you that I know it works because I'm a millennial, and this is the way that I'm viewing more than half of the content I'm engaging with in a day. Also, even if you just look at the statistics too, and the numbers, the metrics, my Instagram stories and live video with my brand and also on my personal Instagram account are getting more views than videos in my permanent feed. Social media had become like so curated that live content is the only thing that feels real and immediate. So I really anticipate that this trend will continue in this direction. 2 years ago, the trend was really about these, ultra aspirational, color coordinated Instagram accounts that favored like composition and high quality photography over anything that looked like real life. when that's right around the time when some of these, like the word influencer and the idea of these influencers and some of these people started making an actual living off of their social capital and content. And I feel like that is also the time that these PR agencies started making these, spreadsheets of these like 50 people that are in this PR echo chamber, these Hannah Brofmans and Amy Song types. And all these lazy publicists in the world are still coming up with this genius idea of tapping these people. But I really think that today's sophisticated consumer can spot a, hashtag partnership a mile away. And whatever tired Excel sheet that the Gap and Michael Kors are using, it's not driving any real market demand. I think the future is unfiltered, raw,
I'm a little bit skeptical here because it's just like I believe what you're saying to be true to an extent, but at the same time, the most popular online content, as far as I know, mainly because of its traffic numbers, is probably Netflix, which is archived content and it's highly produced content. And I'm wondering, yes, to a certain degree, because we're on mobile devices and people are trying to connect via social and they're having these experiences via Snapchat and Instagram stories and Facebook stories. There's this perception that this is going to be around forever, that the community is moving toward live streaming, and live streaming has a much more engaged audience because you've got someone caught in the moment. They're not time shifting. They're not watching in the background. They're actively pursuing this content. But I have a certain amount of skepticism about whether or not it's going to last. Jerlyn, you're going to jump in and talk.
I have to agree with you, Bob, because I am also millennial. And I actually follow Steph, and I love her feed, but I see her feed itself, and I will never look at a live stream because I don't have the time. I will also watch a Netflix movie rather than see some of the influencers I follow on Instagram. I'm just overwhelmed with all the content I'm getting on a day-to-day that I don't care to see your live stream. I'll see an archive video though.
The archive videos, like the archive stories, I feel like are like super exciting right now. And that's kind of the best of both worlds. It was like the idea that it's like impromptu when it happened and that you can see it, you can look back on it, for weeks or months, or we don't know how long Instagram archive stories are going to last.
Yeah.
Even too, looking at the content the next morning too, like even alive and looking at it and maybe missing it in that moment, but then being able to go back or even watch it a couple more times. So it's in this like interesting time too, where it is like, it's up for 24 hours or maybe even longer, maybe for weeks or months. But I think that rawness of real reality, I think that's what the appetite is in the market. So I don't think that like.
But aren't you describing YouTube? I mean, YouTube has been doing this for ages, which is basically
but
you do
super
these.
Curated too. Like
well, that's what I mean.
It's becoming so curated that it's not real, and people want it real.
My issue with this though is like I'm following so many people on Instagram already, and it just seems as if like they're, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me. And like maybe it'll be more effective if they like scheduled this live event and then I might be interested. Like probably say Wednesday at 5 p.m. I'll have this live video. Probably I'll tune into it. But I don't want to, as soon as it came out, as this feature came out, I'm just like, no thanks.
Well, I think it's dangerous for us to look at live streaming, and the value of live streaming is just being about the young celebrities and people who are trying to do impromptu things. I mean, live streaming also includes companies like Cheddar, which is trying to do live streaming news via Facebook. It's an entirely live stream network that's putting on scheduled content that's highly produced about business news. Jay, put some perspective on the live streaming thing. Is live streaming effective now in its current form, its current predominant form? Is that effectiveness just ephemeral and it's going to move into much more of something like what Cheddar is producing? Or do you feel like this is something that can last for a long time and that the egos of people will drive the internet forward for the next 20 years?
Probably both. I think we'll start to see more non-traditional packaged live stream programs like Cheddar. There's no question that the authenticity of live stream has a huge amount of appeal, and not just to millennial and Gen Z demographics, but to all demographics. The point was touched on earlier, the somewhat more difficult to fake engagement in a live stream environment is absolutely true. So it's got a brand advantage there. I think it will continue to be a larger and larger part of the overall communications mix. I don't think it's going to fully take over what we would consider to be kind of classic influencer marketing. It's hilarious to say that for something that's so relatively new, but for this reason, there's many studies that show this, that what sometimes are called citizen influencers, real customers who may not have a huge degree of following but are influential in their own way within their own tribe, those people actually move the needle more so than do quote unquote celebrities. Now, it takes more of them to move the needle because they don't each have a particularly giant audience. But from a pure persuasive standpoint, I actually convince somebody to click here or buy this thing. There's been a lot of research to suggest that citizen influencers are actually better than celebrities. And the reason I don't think live streaming will take over in the true sense is that most of your citizen influencers are not, at least now and perhaps not in the near future, as comfortable doing a live stream recommendation as they are taking a picture and posting it, right? To do a live video requires a measure of self-confidence and frankly, ability that not all citizens have, at least not today. So I think we're not quite there yet to a tipping point, but it wouldn't surprise me if we get there eventually.
Something that concerns me about the live streaming is a scenario that I read or I was listening to on a podcast, and the name escapes me of the streamer. But he was a Twitch streamer, so he's a gamer streamer, and he took a vacation. He was one of the most popular streamers on Twitch. He took a vacation for a week and decided to just not do any gaming and just let his audience chill for a week, and then he was going to come back, and he lost half of his audience. And for me, that's a story of caution, Steph, right? I mean, if I'm an advertiser and I want to commit to this guy, suddenly half his audience is gone after I've already committed to him just because he took a vacation. That sounds like an incredibly fickle audience.
Yeah, but this is to the same point too about citizen or micro influencers. It's like you need to. I'm sure the people that unfollowed him they're not loyal. He's not driving any sort of market demand with them. Actually, it's just an impression. It's people who really, really ride for you. You're not going to lose them as a follower because you took a break for a week. That's the same with all of these people with 1 million followers. Their followers they're not meaningful followers, most of them. It's just about reach and about numbers, and lazy publicists tapping these people, thinking that, they have 1 million followers, so we're going to pay them. But there's people out there that have 2,000 followers that are driving a lot more market demand and have a lot more impact. Than some of these, these big, massive numbers. It's just the numbers don't say anything.
This is always what bugs me. This is what always bugs me about influencer marketing is it seems like there's no real ability to test the quality of who's representing you until you actually do it. I mean, you can watch other brands take a risk with their influencers and see whether or not they were successful, but then they've got the influencer. So you've got to take a chance and you've got to go out there and you've got to spend money to see whether or not the quality is there in the influencer. And the only way to do that is to look at the numbers, the raw numbers of audience, and say, well, this is a good bet. Let's make a bet here.
It's the same thing. We've been talking about it all night. It's about knowing your audience. Too. Mm-hmm. I just started an influencer program. We did it in New York this past year, and it was very successful. And again, it was all micro influencers, kids that really represented our community, and not all of them had a lot of social capital, but really working with them. And we've seen it drive market demand and drive sell-throughs in some of our best retailers. And our retailers are coming into us and being like, the kids are asking for this product. Mm-hmm. And I really, truly believe a lot of it, because we didn't do much marketing last year. It was all because of the influencer program. And now I'm rolling it out globally. And what I'm doing is we're calling them the plugs. So we're finding a plug in every city. And I'm not looking at big numbers, but I'm finding someone who actually knows cool kids who are driving market demand, who are stylish, who are interesting, who are involved in nightlife. I'm actually finding a real person that exists. And then they tell me, 30, 40 of their friends, or 30, 40 people that matter in that market. And I basically put all of their friends on. So it's not about like, how am I supposed to be relevant in Paris? I can't, but I can find a really relevant kid in Paris, and I can talk to them, and I can listen, and I can have a conversation with them about who's influencing market demand, who's awesome. And they're going to put me on to a bunch of people that have like 1,000 followers, 2,000 followers, people who are fairly insignificant. They're not going to show up on these social aggregation apps. They're not going to show up on these PR Excel sheets, but they're people who are actually out there, DJing, making art, have an amazing sense of style, who are popular and well-liked and trusted within their communities. So it's way harder, way, way harder. Like, you can't fake the funk. Like, you really have to go out there and find your audience.
Can't fake the funk. I think we've got a show title. Well, moving on to the final topic of the evening. Finally, Prime Day for Amazon, Singles Day for Alibaba. These retailer-created shopping holidays are juggernauts for sales, but given the fact that the items offered on discount tend to amount to little more than a giant garage sale, Jay, is there a risk of damaging brand perception long-term by continuing these programs? So what's your take on the whole use of these fake shopping holidays?
I don't think you have a whole big risk of brand decay when already you sell everything, right? I mean, what is Amazon's brand right now? What is Alibaba's brand? It is so all-encompassing that the value proposition, the brand attributes are already so fuzzy that I'm not sure that it really matters. Now, if Moose Knuckles had everything free day, that would be a different story. But that's not what we're talking about here. So I don't think in this particular case it's an issue. In a different retail environment, it would be an issue.
Yeah, off-price goods are a real problem in the fashion industry right now because seasons aren't the same. So retailers like Essence, if you guys know it, they're like a luxury fashion retailer based out of Montreal, but they're very globally relevant. They're creeping up and up and up on sale season. They're starting their sale before anyone else is starting their sale. And then the entire industry has to start their sale shortly after, or they can't compete. And really, at the end of the day, I think that we, again, need to look at our end consumer, and we need to, stop kind of pandering to the original gatekeepers and the buyers in the industry and these narrow windows of like spring, summer, fall, winter, holiday, these delivery periods, and again, create unique products that are genuine value to our consumer. And we build a community around those products with real people. And I don't think that they go on sale. I don't think that goes on sale when the market demand's there, when it sells out and it can sell full price all the time.
It's just like, for me, when I wrote this topic, it's just like I had absolutely no reason to believe that this was going to hurt Amazon's brand. But I posed it anyway for the sake of just the argument and the discussion, because it's just like I find this whole Amazon Prime Day to be so completely ineffective at anything more than just selling Prime memberships, which is really profitable for Amazon. I'm not necessarily sure it's profitable for the consumer, because the consumer gets to have an Amazon Prime membership that they may not even need in order to buy junk on the day that they don't really want it. And I'm thinking from a long-term perspective.
I was about to say that, because I'm a Prime member and I just buy things when I need them. I look at things on Prime Day, but it's mostly things I'll never touch. So I'm just wasting money.
Yeah, and it's just like, it seems so out of touch with the consumer. Now, having said that, I mean, they add a lot of value into the Prime membership, and it's just a loss leader or whatever to get the exposure to all the different cool things that you get with Prime. But it does seem a bit out of touch with the consumer overall. Having said that, my end thought is there's a certain holiday called Mother's Day that's pretty much created by Hallmark. It's just like that's the prime day of its time. It's just like this completely useless holiday, Mother's Day and Father's Day, which is purely about selling greeting cards. And I'm wondering. This is not a new tactic, is it? This is something that has been going on all the time. You hijack a holiday, you go for it, and you use it to the advantages of your brand. It seems like it's a perfectly legitimate strategy.
Yeah, I mean, if Coca-Cola created Santa Claus, as is long rumored, then all bets are off, I think, really. Nothing is sacred, Bob.
Nothing is sacred.
That's the theme of the show, I think, is that nothing is sacred.
No, it's
I'm not driven by like one day sales or free shipping or anything like that. Yeah, I like the same. I'm the same. I buy something when I need it or when I want it.
Yeah.
It's right at your fingertips. So trying to incentivize me by making it get it faster, like one day faster. It really doesn't matter. I just will buy it when I really want it or when I need it.
Well, with that, it's time for the Ad Fail 5. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Jay Baer. You can find him at convinceandconvert.com. That's the home of his company, his consultancy. It's also the home of his podcast and his books and everything else he does. So tell us, what would you like to promote, Jay?
Not even a promotion, just an acknowledgement, Bob. Thanks so much for having me on the show again. It's always a blast. But last Sunday, so a week ago today, was the 10th anniversary of Convince and Convert, and only 4% of businesses make it to 10 years, so we're pretty proud of that. So thank you to everybody out there for your support all these years.
Oh, that's great. Congratulations.
Thanks, pal.
Now, next up, we have Stephanie Hoff. You can find her at mooseknucklescanada.com. It's spelled exactly like you think it would. Steph, what would you like to promote?
I guess just check us out on Instagram, or you can follow me on Instagram too. It's Steph, STPH _ Hoff, HOFF. I don't know. I just want more people to see my art. So just follow along and check out my stuff.
And these are very fabulous, very heavy coats. So if you live in a cold weather climate, you definitely want these. If you live in Florida, I'm not so sure unless you're going on a ski vacation, but it's a fantastic product. And last but not least, Jerlyn Thomas. You can find her at jerlynthomas.com. I'll have the link in the show notes. Tell us what's going on in your world, Jerlyn. What would you like to promote?
Well, I'm just trying to break glass ceilings. Recently, I illustrated something for ESPN with the artist look at the struggle of the Black female athlete. I am currently pursuing a half Ironman and realized that only 0.5% of representations are African Americans. So I'm just looking to connect with other people who are trying to break glass ceilings as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's great. I'd love to do whatever I can to help. So definitely help Jerlyn out and check her out at jerlynthomas.com. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me, and you can even find out how to advertise in the program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And don't forget, of course, we have transcription services now through transcribeme.com/BeanCast. That's the site you can go to get a quick discount on your next transcription project. And of course, if you need transcription of this show or any show previous, we've got it now. So check it out. And now it's time for the Ad Fail 5, a rundown of the lowest moments in advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. And first up, the WPP Sir Martin fight is the gift that just keeps giving. Oh my God, Jay, it's really emphasizing the importance of a contract, or in this case, the lack of a good contract, because Sir Martin is going around trying to buy the agency he was trying to buy under WPP, and now he's trying to do it under his own new company. And it doesn't seem like WPP has a very strong case against him to stop him doing this.
Yeah, which is amazing to me because it's clearly tortious interference. And I think that a reasonable jurist would conclude that is not a fair situation. So I suspect he would lose if they ever actually took it to court. But you're right. you would think that in a position of that magnitude that they would have all of this buttoned up, and that he would have had to disappear sort of mafia style for a while. But I'll tell you one thing, Bob. One of these days, this whole WPP thing is going to be an amazing Broadway show.
I think you're probably
So get
right
your
about
tickets
that.
now.
Oh my God! Well, I think it points out that we paid him too much money in this industry over the many years. Because if he can walk away from $20 million and not really care about it, because that's all they're trying to bring against him. They're trying to say we're going to take away your $20 million package. That's not a very big hammer to go against a guy who was making $75 million just a year ago. Well, anyway, apparently it's not. Sorry, next one. A French supermarket chain, Super U, must have forgotten what decade we're living in, deciding that bikini and lingerie wearing women, Jerlyn, would be a perfect way to attract their customer base. I have nothing wrong with people wearing bikinis, but they shouldn't be pumping my gas.
Can someone remind them we're in 2018 and this is not the 60s, please?
Or just that the photography is bad. Like it's just like bad. Like it's tasteless.
Everything is so tasteless. Like, Bob, I don't even know where to start about this.
Yeah, it was pretty horrific.
Now, however, Bob, just to play devil's advocate here, we are talking about a single location of a supermarket chain, and that location is in a medieval village in France. So a case could be made that despite its obvious poor taste, that they did something.
They did something. Okay, there you have it.
And the headline is obviously plump at the pump, and they totally dropped the ball on that. I'm going to blame a French translation error.
Oh my God. Well, next up, apparently it's not just Google that's reading your Gmail account to provide better data services. According to a recent lawsuit and the actual terms of service that you all agreed to when you bought a Gmail account or got a Gmail account, they were granting access to third-party developers as well, Steph. I mean, first of all, I guess you should have known better because they gave you the terms of service ahead of time. But who reads a EULA?
I never do. I'm so terrified of what I've signed up for because I didn't read the fine print. It's not shocking.
I'm gonna have to go back and see what I typed to everyone on my email.
Don't start. Yeah, don't even try it. I feel at this point Google is essentially Facebook. They just don't have the untrustworthy figurehead founder. That's the only difference. Otherwise, it's the same thing.
I already sold my soul.
They've got their own untrustworthy founder.
Right.
Well, Walmart can't seem to reconcile their third-party seller thing against their audience. This time, the Heartland retailer, and we know the Heartland, we talked about it, Jay. Heartland retailer was caught listing in Peach 45 baby clothes, something that didn't go over very well with its very heavily Trump-leaning audience.
Oh my God.
This one, it's just like I feel like they keep swinging both ways. They had the Tree Journalist shirt just a few months ago, and that caused a big stir. And now they've got this on the other side of the political spectrum. Jay, what's going on here?
I mean, certainly big company, lots of products, tricky situation. But I got to tell you, we're in this age where everybody is so quick to be offended, right? And nobody's allowed to be offended. It's amazing that stand-up comics still have jobs. I wonder, and again, my background's in politics originally, so I think about these things from time to time. I just wonder where this ends, right? If the role of the consumer now is to be outraged about everything, do we have to start to hire somebody inside big corporations whose job is essentially chief cultural awareness officer, right? Somebody who is really going through with a fine-tooth comb all the different circumstances to say, let's make sure that nobody is conceivably offended about any of these things. And if that's where we go, then we've talked a lot about art and we've talked a lot about passion on this show. Is there room for art and passion in a set of circumstances where everybody can be easily offended? I don't know if those things can survive together.
I'm kind of with you. I think it's going a little bit overboard to be offended by everything. At the same time, this one seems like if it doesn't happen to Amazon very often, so why is it happening to Walmart?
Yeah, I still think people should know what Walmart's audience is. Like, this would never gone well.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's gonna care. Like as soon as we finish talking about it,
I think
it's just like this stuff happens all the time, and it just like it gives us something to like laugh about or whatever. I guess some people are kind of irritated, but I don't know. It's just it happens way too frequently now. It happens with my brand too. People get like annoyed about an Instagram comment or something. It's like it's done. It's done in a day.
And what you've just described is the whole point of this segment of the show, to just laugh at ourselves and move on.
Well, the fact that Walmart was literally accused in a tweet storm, Walmart stores of Bentonville, Arkansas, was accused as being part of a far left conspiracy. That's not true. I can tell you that right now. That is not a far left conspiracy.
I can agree with that.
Don't read everything you see on the internet. Yeah. Don't believe everything you see on the internet.
By the way, Bob, do you know how many of those baby clothes were sold?
I have no idea. I have no idea what this uproar is actually.
Hillary Clinton's grandchildren all got such clothes. That was the only.
And last but not least, Budweiser just won some top prizes at Cannes for a clever search campaign that invited drinkers to Google search terms and see images of famous people drinking a Bud. Besides the fact, Steph, that the entire campaign was designed to get around having to license the images, a Dutch brewer seems to have hijacked the campaign now. I feel like this is a total great comeuppance for them trying to get around paying photographers for the images.
It's so clever. It's so clever. I did a campaign like a year ago where we like made 10 fake Tinder profiles and invited people to our party. I don't know. Use what you can use in front of you. Just like figure out a clever way to do it. We ended up getting kicked off of Tinder for it, but who cares? It's just Tinder. I don't know. I think it's genius. Giving me inspiration.
Yeah, I'm buying Google ads for the search term the BeanCast, which is going to come up with an ad for my podcast, ladies and gentlemen. So go ahead and
you'll never beat Sean Bean. Bob. You'll never beat Sean Bean. Sean Bean when he's cast.
The Sean Bean cast is definitely the.
That's my number one. That's my number one Google alert. Sean Bean cast as. Well, have something to add to this list or just want to discuss it, comment online, use the hashtag AdFail5. That's pound, AdFail, and the number 5. Well, that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an iTunes listener, we've also provided a direct link to the iTunes Music Store, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory of iTunes. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.